Shant, I know you wanted to add something to what Michael had to say.
Sure. Michael, I very much agree with your comments on how unorganized the efforts were between the Armenian government and the Armenian diaspora, and that was a large reason why there was so much anxiety in the community, because nobody really understood what was happening in terms of backroom negotiations, who was speaking on behalf of the diaspora, was anyone even asked to speak on behalf of the diaspora. And then the attempt by the president and his administration was even worse in trying to, at the last minute, do a tour of the U.S., and I know that it caused a lot of frustration and negativity, and it brought to attention fractures within the community, which of course we don't want to air publicly. And there should be ways that we could avoid this in the future. Armenia is still a new country. It has a lot to learn from geopolitical diplomacy in terms of public relations as well, and how to approach these types of issues, especially with something as unusual as having such a large diaspora spread around the world. I know that the president had appointed not too long ago a minister of diaspora relationship, which I think was an excellent start. That needs to continue to develop and strengthen that relationship. But I think we in the diaspora need to do something as well. And one of the recent ideas that's been tossed around was by Harut Sasunyan about the plan to form some sort of a national assembly of representatives, elected representatives of the Armenian diaspora. And I think this idea does have a lot of merit for those that are not familiar with the Sasunyan plan, or the framework of a plan. It calls for one representative to be elected for every 20,000 Armenian diasporans, and to form a council or body of about 350 members throughout the world. It would create committees and elect the chairman to speak as one voice for the diaspora, assuming that voice would represent the elected majority. And of course, this could serve many purposes, as Mr. Sasunyan mentions in his article. It could serve for cultural purposes as well, for political purposes, as well as the recognition of the Armenian genocide. It could also be used as a mechanism to exert influence onto the Armenian government for diaspora-related issues, and certainly vice versa, because it would give the Armenian government a forum to come to instead of the fragmented organizations that we have currently, and speak to one group that would potentially represent the Armenian community. And there are lots of ways that this could be done in this day and age with technology, through online voting, through maintaining a large database of Armenians registered throughout the world. And I think it's a good idea. Michael, what do you think about that?
I agree. I like the idea on principle. I think it's one of those things where the details will be hard to work out in terms of getting the accurate population figures, getting election rules, financing this body, and then most of all, giving it the authority and authenticity that it needs to function. We're not the only problem. We're not the only people with this kind of problem. If you look at even the African American community here in the U.S., they also have a problem of who gets to represent them, whether it's Reverend Jesse Jackson or Oprah Winfrey or the NAACP, which is a long and great record of supporting African Americans. They all have a legitimate question of, well, who gave you the right to do this? Who gives you the power to speak on behalf of this community? So the Armenian diaspora, which is global in scope, has this same problem, and whatever institution you do develop needs to have an authenticity to be able to maintain an authoritative voice. Otherwise, if it doesn't have that authenticity, then some Armenians or some groups of Armenians or Armenians from specific countries will simply disavow it, and then its power is once again undermined. So I agree with Mr. Sasunyan's plan in principle, and there are a lot of details to be worked out. But as I said, the end result, whatever it is, it needs that authenticity. I do want to speak to briefly about a similar thing was proposed in the United States with the Armenian Assembly of America, which began in the early 1970s, and it was basically seen as an umbrella organization that would bring together different Armenian groups. And it wasn't so much a democratically inspired one, like this current plan is, but it was more about bringing the different organizations into some kind of coalition. And for a while it worked. For a good 10, 15 years it worked, and eventually it unraveled. But so that there has been some experience, at least in America, of trying this kind of a coordinated effort. I would also urge listeners to look at, again, other examples. If you look at the Jewish diaspora after World War II, in the early 1950s, Germany came to Israel and wanted to negotiate reparations arising from the Holocaust. Now, the Jewish diaspora, within a matter of a few months, was able to organize an umbrella organization of about 24 Jewish organizations from different parts of the world. And they managed to do that very quickly, and they negotiated it with Germany in regard to Holocaust reparations side by side, along with Israel. And that institution that they created, the umbrella organization, still exists to this day and still participates in talks arising from the Holocaust and administrating any reparations that are paid from that event. So that's not something, that wasn't a Jewish organization that was established to deal with every issue, but it was established to deal with Holocaust-related issues. And maybe for the diaspora, that might be easier to establish some kind of umbrella organization that deals with issues arising from the genocide and not every single issue that the diaspora confronts. But those are good examples to learn from, because, as I said, we're not the only people in the world who face these problems.
Shant, let's move ahead, because there are so many questions, and each and every question is answered so eloquently with so much passion. Shant, growing up, what has the Armenian community given you, and how much of a tie have you been able to have with the community, and why is it that many times you hear Armenians say Yeridasartuchuna, the youth, is not around, and nobody seems to be able to get them involved?
This is a very important and serious question that we're all faced with today. In fact, Michael and I were having this discussion before we started today. If I can just use an analogy for a minute, the word diaspora comes from the word to disperse. And if you think about a pebble or a stone being thrown into a pond, and the ripple effect that that causes, and this dispersion as it gets wider and wider and wider is less strong and strong, and it eventually dilutes itself to the point that it's fully dispersed. That's exactly what we're faced with in our own diaspora right now. You had a very core center in the early years after the genocide that really worked very hard to reunite the country, the culture, the people, the education, and we really have to pay tribute to our grandparents and our parents for all that they have sacrificed to get to this level. And then what's happened, though, is as we have all assimilated into the various countries that the Armenian diaspora exists in today, we've become more American, we've become more French, we've become more Russian, we've become more Middle Eastern, and this dispersion will continue until eventually we're fully absorbed. And so how do we deal with these issues, and how do we, this is one of the reasons why the youth isn't as involved or as interested in Armenian issues as previous generations had been. So this is really a question that we're all struggling to deal with.